One. Welcome everyone to the latest edition of the Sight Screen Cricket Podcast. I'm your host, Tawhid Qureshi, and today I have with me one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. It is Mr. Machel St Patrick Hewitt. Welcome, Machel.
How you doing, Tawhid? In fact, I don't know why I'm asking you how you're doing, because both of us are in the exact same position, feeling probably the exact same way. But how you doing all the same?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, well, we'll definitely come on to how we're both feeling at the moment. It's interesting because actually, before we get started, let me just introduce you properly, because I think most people know who Machel is. One half, I would say, of the inspirational Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And just before we start, I'd like to say that it was fantastic actually being on the CCP podcast earlier on in the year during that West Indies series. I was fortunate enough to be asked to appear a couple of times during that series, which was fantastic for me. And actually, what I really wanted to say was that Caribbean Cricket Podcast is that for me acted as a bit of an inspiration in terms of what I'm doing here with Bangladesh cricket and Sight Screen Cricket journal as well. So it's really acted as a bit of a blueprint, a bit of a guide and an inspiration, as I say. So thank you for that, first and foremost.
No worries, man. And obviously anyone who's watching this, big up what Tawhid has been doing with regards to Bangladesh cricket. We always say to everyone, that's the place you need to go, Sight Screen Cricket Journal, in order to understand the ins and the outs, the minutiae, the nuances of what goes on there. So we recommend Tawhid each and every time. But also, Tawhid, I just want to say thank you to you, because that period at the start of the year when it was Bangladesh versus West Indies, it felt like the eyes of the cricket world were on everything else but that series. But alongside yourself, I felt like we did our best to articulate what was one of two of the lesser teams in current world cricket, but it was an iconic test series. The ODI series was worth a watch as well. So I just want to say thank you for that, because as you will remember, there weren't many eyes on that series at the time, but we did our best to amplify what was going on.
We did, absolutely. And it was a brilliant series. I know Bangladesh ended up losing that test series 2-0, but I thought it was an absolutely thrilling series. And watching at sort of 3-4 in the morning, not sure who else was out there watching, but being able to connect with you and Santoki was brilliant during that whole series. So yeah, absolutely. So let's wind back then to where we are today currently. So when I tried to arrange this actually a week or two ago, I was thinking this would be quite a good time to sort of catch up. We're sort of halfway through roughly the Super 12 phase. We could see how things are starting to pan out. And the hope was that, both Bangladesh and the West Indies would have notched up at least one win, maybe 2 out of 2 in the Super 12 so far. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Both teams really struggling, I'd say, in the Super 12s, still searching for their first win. So let's, focus on West Indies in terms of their tournament experience so far. Obviously, losing both their games. First one, as we all know, just didn't show up against England, bulldozed for 55, and then there was a slight hiccup, I'd say, in England's chase, but they were always likely to win that. And then just the other day against South Africa as well, kind of meandering a bit to that total that was kind of insubstantial in the end. And there's been lots of focus, I know, on Lendl Simmons' innings at the top of the order, really kind of not setting things up as West Indies would have wanted. So, yes. Machel, what's your take on things so far, I guess?
I haven't reached the point yet where I do the internal introspection and question if I should have seen this coming. And the reason why I say that is there's a lot of Caribbean fans, Caribbean media who are currently doing that, and are doing the whole kind of, and in fact, I wonder if it's happening in Bangladesh cricket as well, where there's that kind of hindsight thing of, I told you this was going to happen. I told you we shouldn't have picked Chris Gale. I told you we shouldn't have picked Lendl Simmons. I told you we shouldn't have picked Andre, like all of that, right? I'm not there yet because my mindset is 90% of the squad is exactly who everybody would have picked. And for me, the reality is it's not that we picked the wrong squad, it's that they haven't shown up in the two games. But I'm mindful that I haven't made the switch over to where I think the majority of people are at this particular moment in time. Yes, I had reservations. Yes, we were all concerned about what happened in the summer series and whether it would click in the World Cup. It hasn't clicked. I wrote a couple of tweets a few days ago, maybe it was even yesterday. In fact, it was 2 nights ago, where I said maybe this World Cup, and again, I'm going to put to you, I wonder if this is something similar with Bangladesh cricket. Maybe this World Cup is just one step too far for a certain generation of cricketers that we've got. I can't, you're going to speak for me on Bangladesh, but I just wonder if there's parallels here. Was it one step too far for Chris Gayle? Was it one step too far for Bravo? Was it one step too far for Dre Russ? Was it one step too far for Lendl Simmons? Was it one step too far for, obviously Pollard's a captain, but you get my drift. So there is that burning feeling in the back of my head of, is that the greater narrative here? But then I did a live Caribbean cricket podcast live yesterday, and a lot of the points I raised to the community then was, even if we take the argument that we had too many experienced players over the age of 35, whatever it might be, they're there because the younger players haven't forced them out. So in an ideal world, Chris Gayle shouldn't be at a World Cup still at 42 years old, playing at number 3 or opening for the West Indies. There should be a youngster who has forced him out but through sheer weight of runs to make that not be a conversation we had to have. But they haven't, so we are where we are. So there's all of those dynamics going on. And then just in terms of the performances, you've hit the nail on the head. The first game, we just didn't show up and essentially got humiliated and bundled out. England, I didn't get to watch the majority of the Bangladesh game yesterday, but England were very, very clinical against us. And I get the feeling from the little that I saw of Bangladesh, England, that they were very clinical against Bangladesh as well. I'm assuming that, like us, Bangladesh made some very simple mistakes that could have stopped it being like the way it was. But it looks like England were extraordinarily clinical against Bangladesh as well. So England are a very good team. West Indies, that still doesn't excuse West Indies being 55 all out, but on the flip side, we have to accept that England are a good team. South Africa, well, you don't want to put it all on one player, but that Lendl Simmons innings was extraordinary. And by extraordinary, I mean bad. and that really took the wind out of our sails, because at the end of the power play, we were 43 for none. That's a fine foundation. The problem was he didn't kick on after that foundation, and then he didn't get out till the 13th over. So he really, by doing that, everybody who came after him had to basically go from ball one, and that's when South Africa started to pick up the wicket. So it can't be underestimated how extraordinarily bad that innings was in terms of himself, but then also how it affected the dynamics of everyone batting who then had to come in to kind of rescue the situations. So where are we now? We're probably in the same place as Bangladesh. We've got to win all of our games and hope for a miracle. Bangladesh, strangely, might be in a better position than us. And hear me out here. If West Indies, South Africa, Australia, historically or recent history, are very suspect against top quality spin. Forget the fizz for a minute. Let's just talk about the top quality spin. Yeah. If the spinners turn up, because I'm not taking the Bangladesh victory for granted on Friday, if I'm honest with you, because if those spinners turn up, I think it's curtains for us. And similarly, if they turn up versus Australia, I think it's a problem for Australia. I mean, I'm trying to give you some faint straws to cling on to here.
You're being more optimistic than I am, which is good. No, carry on.
But look at from our perspective, if we win all three, and if we perform against Bangladesh, say our players actually all turn up, then I would assume we beat Bangladesh and we beat them well. but I know how bad we are versus spin. And I'm assuming Bangladesh are going to come at us with a cadre of spinners. And it wouldn't surprise me, therefore, if Bangladesh can pull off a victory. So that's kind of where we're at, you know?
Yeah, lots of good, interesting points there as ever, Machel. I think just to go back to the start in terms of what you were saying about parallels between where the two teams are, Bangladesh and West Indies. Yeah, I would agree. I think there are parallels in terms of kind of the media reaction or the fan reaction to how sort of badly Bangladesh have done so far, certainly in the Super 12 stage. And I think, yeah, there is a certain temptation to say that, certain players should be in the squad and, certain players should have been picked. So I think that the big one kind of floating around is the fact that Tamim kind of withdrew from the squad himself prior to the tournament. So, we all know where, and I think you made this point yesterday very clearly that, when a player's not in the squad or in the playing 11, his stock just rises and rises through the roof. He suddenly becomes almost, the greatest player, a GOAT, right? Becomes the best player of all time, but by virtue of not playing. So, yeah, that's certainly, I think, something that's happened maybe around the debate with Tamim. But because actually, I don't think he would have made a huge amount of difference at the top of the order. Okay, he would have provided a bit of stability, but actually, if you look at his T20 international record, certainly over a long period of time, yeah, his strike rate. I was saying the other week that I feel that to be in the top six of a T20 international team, your strike rate has to be 130 plus, really. To be an effective kind of team. And he's not really in that league, I would say. So, yeah, I don't think him being in the team would make an awful lot of difference. And, yeah, again, agree with what you say. I think essentially Bangladesh have always had quite a small talent pool in terms of, yet there is obviously, a first-class cricket setup. There's lots of domestic teams in terms of sort of 20-over cricket as well. There's been about 2 or 3 different 20-over cricket competitions in the last, sort of 2 years, I'd say, since the last BPL, which was at the end of 2019, the start of 2020. But essentially, yeah, there is quite a small talent pool. And yeah, the starting 11 in each of the 5 games that they've played so far, you couldn't really argue with, those selections. Okay, there might be maybe 1 or 2 at the most selections that you could kind of query, but essentially, you've got to say that those players are pretty much the best players that they have at their disposal. So yeah, certain parallels there. I mean, I guess, yeah, sort of focusing. Let's come back to Lendl Simmons because I've got a question I want to ask. So do remind me to ask you about that. But yeah, in terms of Bangladesh and I guess where they are. Yeah, they had a bad start to the tournament. Obviously, shock defeat to Scotland, which at the time I was thinking, yeah, it was a bad defeat, and qualification really for the Super 12s was at one point looking really dicey. But I thought they bounced back from that quite well. That it was a tough game against Oman, actually, which they, that was kind of in the balance, but they managed to beat Oman pretty comfortably in the end, and then sort of convincingly beating PNG as you would expect. So going into the Super 12s, I was actually quite confident of where they were, but I feel that the loss to Sri Lanka in that first game really has kind of taken the wind out of their sails a little bit. They were on top in that game for about 30 overs and then just inexplicably kind of took their foot off the gas, some strange bowling decisions.
Can I jump in there, Toy? Because I did actually watch that game and pretty much, I think I watched the whole game. No, that's a lie. I think I kind of tuned in near maybe the last 10 overs or the second half of Bangladesh's batting, right? Now, at the halfway stage, Bangladesh, as far as I was concerned, were well in front, right? or I thought they'd got more than enough. Then obviously Sri Lanka came firing out in the power play and was like, actually, this is in the balance. Then Shakib did what Shakib does. At that point, when Shakib did what he did, it was Bangladesh's game to lose. And I'm just intrigued to know. I'm sure you probably covered it already in our previous podcast, but this is a West Indian. I'm trying to get the West Indian perspective to see how this then impacts on our game on Friday. It felt like Bangladesh were just sleepwalking after that and assumed. It was really weird to watch. It felt like it felt like they only realized they could lose it when it was too late. And that it was a really. I just want to know how it felt to you, because as a neutral, I was like, wait, what's going on here? They're just letting this game meander, and then all of a sudden it was like, wait a minute, Sri Lanka are on top now. But it kind of just happened without. It was as if the game was being played in the twilight zone, and Bangladesh had forgotten what was going on. It's almost as if when Shakib took his wickets, they thought the game's over now. We've got this, and didn't. I don't want to put it on the captain, but I just questioned some of the tactics to allow the game to drift like that, as if they thought we'll pull this back if we have to, as opposed to no, we need to. What's the word I'm looking for here? We're on top now. Let's force the issue. Do you understand what I'm trying to? I know I didn't really explain that very well, but do you get where I'm trying to come from?
Totally. And I wrote about this a couple of days ago, and I think spoken to a couple of people about this as well. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I say, they inexplicably kind of took their foot off the gas and then just let the game drift. So yeah, you're right. I think at the end of 10 overs in that chase, I think Sri Lanka were 4 down for about 70 odd. Shakib had just taken 2 wickets, and then Saifuddin in the very next over picked up another wicket. So Sri Lanka were 4 down and still with about 100 odd to get. And yeah, you're right. They let the game drift, and like we all know in T20 cricket, things can change so quickly. The format is condensed. You take your eye off the ball, even for a couple of overs, or even for 1 over, and the whole kind of complexion of the game can change. And that's basically what happened. So the short answer, I guess, is around, just a total mismanagement of the bowling resources by Mahmudullah. And you're right, I don't like to put everything on him. I think he's a very sort of dignified, humble kind of character. I think being captain of Bangladesh is not an easy task for anyone. There's always a weight of expectation, I think, versus the reality of what kind of skills and resources you have at your disposal. But yeah, it was really a tactical kind of blunder. So he decided to bring himself on for 2 overs, I think, and Afif Hussain, the part-time. So they're both part-time right arm off spin. Yeah. And the idea was that, at the time there were 2 left-handed Sri Lankan batsmen, Asalanka and Rajapaksa, who were sort of going great guns. So the idea was to bring on the right armers, take the ball away from the left-handers. So it was to do with matchups, but I've written about this extensively in that, common sense says at that stage you've got to bowl your best bowlers, not your part-timers, who let's face it, I think there's a great deal of analysis done, and good analysis done on matchups and why they work and what's good about them, and totally agree with all the analysis. But also at times you've got to understand the flow of the game, the direction of the game, and that's basically, I think, what Mahmudullah on that occasion just failed to grasp. And in the final analysis, when you've got both the Fizz and Shakib only bowling sort of free, they didn't bowl their full quota of overs. So Shakib bowled free, the Fizz bowled free. So at the end, when you look at that scorecard, you're thinking, what on earth has happened there? Something's clearly gone wrong, which basically it did. So it was definitely a tactical blunder there. And, the hope is that that Bangladesh and Mahmudullah and everyone else learns from it. I remember writing the other day that actually the really concerning thing is that it's a really experienced side that Bangladesh have actually put together. If you look at the number of caps in that team, just between Mushfiqur, Mahmudullah, Shakib, there's a huge number of caps, so they really shouldn't be making those kinds of mistakes.
Yeah, and like I say, didn't get to really delve into the England game as such, but having saw bits and pieces and then analysed the scorecard, much like versus West Indies, the Moeen Ali strategy, I couldn't believe it when we played into England's hand versus Moeen, and then Bangladesh did the exact same thing. They did the exact same thing as us, and let Moeen just trundle in and take some wickets. And I don't care what any England fan says. Moeen shouldn't be taking as many wickets as he has in the 2 games so far. When really, I feel like all Moeen's actually trying to do is bowl a containing spell. He's not actually supposed to be taking wickets. And I really have to look at West Indies and look at Bangladesh and criticize and say, how are you letting in? That's a bonus for England. That strategy that England are getting away with is a bonus. That's not maybe England fans watching this will be like, no, put credit on Moeen's name. Yeah, but come on. That's bonus wickets. And I couldn't believe it when I saw that Bangladesh fell into the exact same trap as well. And once you fall into that trap, the game is perfectly set up for England because Woakes is coming. Tymor Mills is coming. And I'll give their bowling attack their due, but what's coming next. If you give 2 easy wickets away, then you're already behind the 8 ball. Do you follow?
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Moeen. I think he's a fantastic cricketer, fantastic white ball cricketer. And yeah, agree with what you're saying. I don't think he should be taking that many wickets with that sort of bowling in the power play, basically. I think the fact that he's been bowling in the power play, so he bowled all his 4 overs sort of straight off against West Indies. He bowled 3 overs consecutively yesterday against Bangladesh, and yeah, like you say, picked up a couple of wickets without having to do an awful lot. And I mean, what I would say about the performance from Bangladesh yesterday, it was like the flattest I've actually seen them in quite a long time, certainly in the field. I was going back to, the last time I saw them play that in that sort of manner was probably when they toured New Zealand earlier this year, and they basically got beat in every game of that tour. So towards the end of that tour, they looked very flat. It was a similar thing I felt yesterday. And actually, it started off quite well because Liton Das hit Moeen for a couple of 4s in that first over. So his first over went for 10 runs. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe this might be a bit different. But then in his very next over, he got 2 wickets in 2 balls. I think, both open as well. Liton Das, really short on confidence, hasn't really made a score a noteworthy score at all in this World Cup. Had a really bad game against Sri Lanka, dropped a couple of catches, also got fined 10% of his match fee for a confrontation with Sri Lankan fast bowler Kumara, earned himself a demerit point as well. So probably not in the best frame of mind going into that game. So he looked short of confidence. And some of the dismissals I felt were soft. So those 2 wickets in 2 balls, really, the right kind of idea from Liton Das. He was trying to kind of slog sweep Moeen, got a big top edge, caught in the deep. But then the very next ball, Mohammed Naeem, he is a youngster. He is learning the trade, but really just kind of chipped one up to kind of mid off. It was a bit of a nothing kind of a shot, and then. What I felt was really kind of damaging yesterday was, so Bangladesh, Shakib then kind of got out shortly afterwards. So they were 3 down at the end of the power play. And so, in those middle overs, they just let England bowl at them. I thought they let them settle into, a nice steady rhythm. They didn't really challenge them at all, challenge the bowlers in terms of putting them off their lines or lengths. And one of the big things that I was surprised about, and I think a lot of England fans will probably be surprised about, was Liam Livingstone and his kind of part-time leg spin, which ended up getting 2 wickets in those middle overs, which on any other sort of given day, you would think, facing up to a part-time leg spinner on those sorts of pitches, you should be able to sort of milk him around at the very least for singles. But he ended up, I think, getting 2 for 15 off his 3 overs, and the wickets of Mushfiqur, the real prize bonus wickets of Mushfiqur and the captain Mahmudullah, who. Yeah, maybe I was a bit scathing of him. I wrote a piece about yesterday's game, and I said that his innings kind of really did typify just the confused nature of the way that Bangladesh batted overall. They were never quite sure whether to kind of stick or twist in terms of, you've got the best part of 10 overs left in an innings, and really, to beat England, you've got to get up to sort of 160, 170 minimum, but they just kind of meandered along and ended up with that insubstantial total. But just going back to what you were saying earlier, what I would say as well, England are a very, very good T20 team. So, losing to them in a one-off game in isolation, there's no shame in that at all, I would say. They are one of the favourites to sort of go on and kind of win the trophy. But I think what disappointed me most was, kind of the manner of the defeat and the fact that, Bangladesh looked very flat.
Yeah.
So,
go on, sorry.
Yeah, so I guess moving things forward. Actually, let's go back to Lendl Simmons quickly. Going off a little bit off topic, but really interested to get your insights on this. It was interesting, I think, just in general, media attention on the World Cup and the way that the media kind of report and look at coverage of teams like Bangladesh and the West Indies. So we're talking about, mainstream cricket outlets who wouldn't normally pay an awful lot of attention to West Indies and Bangladesh cricket. What I feel is that sometimes when it comes to these tournaments, when it comes to World Cup, you get lots of kind of journalists and broadcasters and all the rest of it desperately kind of scrambling, doing their research, looking at what's happening in Bangladesh and West Indies cricket without necessarily having an awful lot of kind of prior kind of insight into how the teams performed, how the narrative arc or the career arc of a certain player. They won't necessarily have a lot of those insights. So I felt watching or reading a lot of the stuff about that Lendl Simmons innings was quite interesting because, for someone who doesn't really know who he is, who doesn't really watch him or hasn't watched him over the last 12 months, let alone sort of 4 or 5 years of his career, they'll probably look at that innings in isolation and think, who is this guy? He's absolutely terrible. And I thought actually some of the coverage of not kind of his innings, I guess, and the way, I guess, in general that a lot of the coverage of kind of West Indies cricket and Bangladesh cricket and maybe like Sri Lankan cricket, all those sorts of teams, a lot of the coverage is kind of done in that way. Do you kind of see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think this is where mainstream cricket media I think modern media obviously operates on the model of the amount of clicks, the amount of views, the amount of engagement, and the this, that, and the other. But at some point within the cricket stratosphere, you have to say to yourself, but are we really covering the global game? And then we spoke about it at the top of the show, right? So Bangladesh versus West Indies at the start of the year, nobody cared up until the very final day when Carl Mayers did what he did. And then all of a sudden, it it was so funny to see. All of a sudden, you had everybody talking about the Test series when you and I both know that nobody had paid attention for the first 4 days of the Test match, really and truly. Yeah, when and like actually, even if I go further with Bangladesh, like when Shakib had his spat with when he had, I feel say his spat like it's a one-off, but when
he's had several, yeah.
When he had his latest spat at whatever point it was this year, I felt like, oh, now everyone's paying attention. So I always feel that with Bangladesh and West Indies, things are only newsworthy when they're newsworthy, which then means that nothing has context. And then I guess that's why you have voices like ourselves kind of shouting into the wind, saying, "Well, actually, there's a bit more to this. There's a bit more to this. If you're willing to listen, there's a big context we can play here." So Lendl Simmons' innings was dreadful, as I said at the start. But Lendl Simmons was still in the team for a reason. And actually, if I give that innings some context, yes, it was dreadful. Yes, it deserved to be criticised, but half the reason he was playing that innings was because of what had happened versus England, and there'd been so much pressure from the outside put on the West Indies team throughout the summer. In fact, saying West Indies need an anchor. West Indies need an anchor. I've been all summer been saying stop saying West Indies need an anchor. I still don't agree with this idea of what people think an anchor is. I think they confuse an anchor in ODI cricket with an anchor in that's my personal opinion, an anchor in T20 cricket. So I think West Indies have allowed that to get to them. And what Lendl basically tried to do was play an anchor role, except when he dropped anchor, as in fact, I'll allude to what you said, Tawhid, T20 can change so quickly, literally in the space of a couple of overs, that Lendl's anchor role was fine in the power play because Evan Lewis had got off to a start, so we were 43 for none. His anchor role was not good enough outside of the power play for 2 or 3 overs because when Evan got out, suddenly all the pressure was on. So yes, if you look at it in isolation, it's a dreadful innings, but there is always a context to kind of build around things in West Indies. And like basically supporting your point, it can be frustrating to see everybody jump to what I think is the easy media narrative. So the easy media narrative around West Indies since before the tournament started and even now is West Indies need a Marlon Samuels type player. That's I've heard that narrative now for 4 or 5 months without anybody really looking into what does that actually mean though, and does that mean anything in the real context of the West Indies side? And I don't know how you find it for Bangladesh, but it can be very frustrating to just see everybody latch onto what I think are very simplistic narratives around the team because the team isn't covered in any level of depth. Do you follow my meaning there?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that was probably what I was trying to articulate very badly in terms of just a lot of kind of lazy generalizations are kind of trotted out. I feel when Bangladesh play at kind of World Cups and kind of major tournaments without, like you say, looking in kind of any kind of nuanced detail about why a player is sort of performing as he is. What's the background to that? What's the bigger picture? And without getting too off topic, I mean, one of the things that sort of made me make that point and try and get your insights on it was that read a piece about Bangladesh cricket. I think it was yesterday or the day before. I won't name the outlet, but it's on my Twitter feed. You can have a look at it. A big sort of one of the biggest UK online newspapers sort of did a piece on Bangladesh cricket, and it was the sort of piece where when you read it, I mean, any time that anyone does a feature on Bangladesh cricket, I feel is a good thing because generally it doesn't happen. So it's good that people are taking notice and writing about it. That's absolutely a good thing. But it was one of those pieces where you read it, it was quite apparent by the end of it that the person writing it probably only had if I'm being really scathing, it was probably, you know, the editor sort of coming to them and saying, right, we need several hundred words on Bangladesh cricket. What can you give us? And it was quite apparent that they hadn't really, you know, taken a big interest in Bangladesh cricket. Just from, you know, the way that they were sort of talking about certain players, and even from, you know, the titles that they were given certain players. And to top it off, they mislabeled. So they were talking about Shakib, and they had a photograph with a caption about Shakib, but the photograph was lit on Das, which kind of topped it all off. But anyway, I feel we're straying slightly off topic. But I mean, I could talk about, you know, the media and cricket reporting for hours and hours. I'm sure you could as well, Machel. But let's move forward to tomorrow's game then. So as we were saying at the start, both countries, both teams, 0 from 2. What can we expect tomorrow? I think from a Bangladesh point of view, I know you were saying earlier that, you know, even if West Indies win their 3 remaining games, they're hoping for a miracle. I think it's the same really for Bangladesh. And actually, the way that I see it now, I think they should actually just forget about looking too far into the future and qualification for the semis. I think the best thing for Bangladesh now is that they've got 3 games to really salvage their World Cup. And I think the way that they should look at it, I know it's a cliche, but, you know, just take that West Indies game, you know, as one game in isolation, just focus all their energy on it, try and perform to the best of their ability and kind of bounce back, really. From a West Indies point of view, how do you think they'll be approaching tomorrow's game?
Well, the main thing that's going to be interesting to see is they will make changes, but the question is how many changes will they make? And if they make too many, is that a gut response to the criticism that's coming towards the team? Jason Holder's now in the squad because Obed McCoy is injured. Some quarters have been calling for Roston Chase since the beginning of the tournament. And because it's Bangladesh, there are some, I'm one of them, who would say play O'Shane Thomas because he's our quickest bowler. As much as you and I spoke about England and Liam Livingstone and Moeen Ali taking 4 wickets between them, I see those as bonus wickets. The person who would have caused Bangladesh the biggest difficulty would have been Tymor Mills. Now, the only bowler we've got, granted this is a big if that bowler was on song, would be O'Shane Thomas, who can hit over 90 and hit hard lengths regularly if he's on song. The question West Indies have to ask themselves is, do they gamble and play O'Shane Thomas? Because if O'Shane Thomas is his usual wayward self, Bangladesh can go to town on him. So there's a lot of selection dilemmas that West Indies have to consider. And the problem, of course, is when you have the big figure of Jason Holder now in the squad, you know that if you don't play him and if you happen to lose, if you thought the criticism was bad before, it's going to go through the roof if you don't play Jason Holder. So almost the game is being overshadowed by the selection issues than the actual game itself. What I want to see them do, like you said about Bangladesh, go in, assume that the World Cup's over, play with some freedom, play a bit of your natural game. Yeah, and just do that. Do that. At this point in time, I think people would still, I was about to say they would take another defeat. I mean, I don't know about that, but people would still accept a defeat if it went down to like the last ball and both teams are just going hammer and tongs at it. I think people would accept that. What sticks in the craw right now for both sets of fans is both games have felt like we haven't given our best, or we've been our own worst enemy. England didn't have to play that well to beat us. South Africa, we gave them the game. And I feel like with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, you gave them the game. England didn't have to play that well to beat. Do you see what I mean? So right about now, I just want to see one complete performance.
Yeah,
so, and if we lose, we lose.
Yeah, I totally agree with that in terms of how Bangladesh have performed so far. Yeah, it definitely feels to me that they haven't done themselves justice. Um, we always say that the likes of Bangladesh can beat any other team on their day. It's just that unfortunately, well, it seems to be a recurring theme. That day doesn't come round often enough, particularly when we're looking at ICC kind of tournaments. When we're looking at bilateral series, particularly at home, it's a very different story. But yeah, I certainly feel that they haven't done themselves justice. And
Sorry, I just have one last question for you because I know you're bringing this to an end.
yeah,
So one thing I did write about is, and maybe actually, this is a bit of an unfair question because maybe this is something you actually want to address when the tournament's over, because I know we'll be addressing it. I think that there's a changing of the guard coming for West Indies after this tournament, and our first T20 series will be England in January and start of 2022. Sorry, in the Caribbean. And part of me is like, you know what? The old guard, you brought us 2 World Cups. I'm going to clap you off into the sunset. Come the England series in January, I now need to see the young guys coming through. Is there that sense with Bangladesh of a changing of the guard, or do you think the exact same players are going to go to Australia next year as well?
well, yeah, I think that's a crucial thing. The fact that Australia is only in 12 months' time, or even less than 12 months' time,
Yeah,
maybe,
less. Yeah,
which
sorry.
which doesn't actually give you an awful lot of time to make that transition. But in terms of what you're saying in terms of the changing of the guard, yes. I mean, personally, I feel there's always been that sense ever since the end of the 2019 World Cup, the 50 over Cricket World Cup, where again, Bangladesh underperformed. Shakib had a brilliant World Cup, and they managed to win, I think, 3 games in total, but one of them being that big run chase against West Indies. But overall, they kind of underperformed as a team, and I felt, at the end of that series, well, shortly after that series, Mashrafi Mortaza retired. And in terms of the T20 team, we've seen like Tamim has, withdrawn from the team. For this tournament, it'll be really interesting, I think, what he does, or what he decides he wants to do after this tournament. If he really wants to play in that Australian series, I think it's kind of up to him a little bit. If he wants, he could probably get into that team and play in Australia if he really wants. But does it benefit the team long term? Yeah, I'm not sure. But you're right. I think that there does need to be a changing of the guard, and I think that's been a constant for about the last couple of years. There haven't been the caliber. Yeah, the unfortunate thing is there just haven't been the caliber of players to step up, to fill the shoes of Shakib, to fill the shoes of Mushfiqur, to fill the shoes of Mahmudullah, which is why even now, really, those 3 players are the core of the team in terms of batting, in terms of, in the field, it's Shakib and the Fizz. And, any opposition, any opponents, i.e. West Indies tomorrow, if you can target that core and, get some successful outcomes against them in terms of wickets and runs, then really you've pretty much won the battle. So, yeah, I feel that there hasn't been a level of consistency, certainly from the other players who are less experienced to kind of fill those shoes. So, yeah, there are certainly lots of questions and issues that need to be resolved going forward, certainly into the next World Cup. But yeah, let's wrap this one up, because I always try to end on a bit of an optimistic note, even though sometimes when I write about Bangladesh cricket, it just throws me into a bleak kind of dark place. But in terms of tomorrow's game, yeah, I'm hoping for a close encounter, a lot of runs, hopefully as well. Can I ask you for a prediction?
Listen, my head says West Indies win. Gosh. my heart says 120 all out and Bangladesh win.
Well, it's funny because I think we're both thinking in the similar way. I'd love Bangladesh to win, but I also feel that they're on a bit of a downward spiral after that Sri Lanka game, after yesterday's game as well. So I hope they win, but I can see that not happening. Machel, I'm gonna wrap this up because I know you need to leave. But before I do, just one very, very quick question. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here, but I certainly was taken aback and a little bit distressed by an announcement that you guys made. I think it was shortly before the World Cup was kicking off in terms of the future of Caribbean cricket podcasts. And I think the announcement was basically saying that you might have to sort of wind back on a lot of the things that you do in terms of the podcast, in terms of the coverage. Are you able to say any more about the future of CCP?
Yeah, so and thank you for that. I mean, at this moment, how long's left till the World Cup's over? Well, it's nearly over. So, sorry. The point was to kind of bring the curtain down at the end of the World Cup. We can't say too much at the moment. There are a few people who have reached out to discuss some stuff and try and prevent that happening. I can't say that that's confirmed by any stretch of the imagination. I just know that, and I'm sure you feel the same, Tawhid, doing this, and same with you with Sight Screens Cricket Journal. It's a labour of love. And you're doing it because you love Bangladesh cricket. We love West Indies cricket. You want to, if you're doing it, you want to do it properly. You don't want to paint by the numbers, or you don't want to do because there's enough of that already. do you know what I mean? So if we're doing this, we want to do it properly. But then at the same time, sometimes you just feel like there's a lot of time going into this, and you sometimes just question. Not that it's about reward, but you know what I mean, like just reward versus time, etc. And sometimes that can be a bit frustrating. So where the plan is still the same, but watch this space, I guess, is what I would say, because maybe we might be able to announce something in, I'm looking at the date, in a couple of weeks that might prevent that being the case. So watch this space is what I would say.
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic about that news, because I, for one, would be very saddened and kind of devastated if Caribbean Cricket Podcast doesn't continue in some form or another going forward. I think it's a vital resource. You know, everyone out there in the Twitter sphere, in cricket Twitter, kind of. You know, it's basically a great asset, and let's hope it continues. And absolutely agree with what you're saying. We don't do this for reward. I'd say it's more than a labour of love. I'd say it's a bit of an obsession. Actually, which probably isn't a healthy thing. But there we are. I think that's just the way it is when you love cricket, and you know, you love Bangladesh cricket or West Indies cricket or whatever it happens to be. But Let's finish on that cautiously optimistic note then, Machel. It's been great to have you on. Thank you once again. And obviously, if you haven't checked out the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, please do so. Check them out online and on Twitter as well. So yeah, let's wrap it up there. Please do go and check out sightscreencricketjournal.com as well. And on Twitter, I'm going to be trying to get a couple of more podcasts out before the end of the World Cup, as well as lots of writing as well. So until next time, thank you very much, and see you later. Bye for now.